Any questions?
In the Anapanasati,
Mm-hmm.
it says breathing in, experiencing the body, breathing out, experiencing the body.
Mm-hmm.
Some meditators, teachers explain that it is body of the breath.
Mm-hmm.
Some say it's body of physical body.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Well, the evidence in the canon, and also what I was trained, was that we were talking about the whole body, the physical body as you feel it. And even if it were just the whole body of the breath, you don't experience your breath only at the nose. You experience the breath in the chest, in the stomach, and if you get very sensitive, you experience it in the, in the different parts of your body. And there are passages where the Buddha talks about how when you get the mind into right concentration, there will be a sense of pleasure and rapture that you then spread to fill the whole body. So that seems to be what's meant in the Anapanasati Sutta.
Ajahn, could you please comment from your knowledge about why is it not good to sell Dhamma?
Well, selling the Dhamma turns it into a commodity. And an important part of the experience of learning the Dhamma is that it is a gift from the person who's teaching it. If you're going to be teaching generosity, you have to show generosity to begin with. So that makes the words about generosity become alive through the fact that the Dhamma is being freely given. Because when you put a price on something, you're putting up a wall. You're not going to get this until you pay the price. Whereas if you give it freely, then it erases that wall. And you think about this in terms of social relationships, and where do you get things freely? It's in the family. And so there's a sense of family connection when you receive the Dhamma for free.
How to practice while raising a child and not to attach to a child?
You're going to be attached to your child. There's no way not to be attached to the child. Your main concern should be with what you're teaching the child by your example. And you want to teach the child in the beginning, you want to teach the child to be responsible and to have some gratitude. So think mainly about the lessons that you're teaching, not only in your words, but also through your actions. And so what kind of example are you setting for the child? And the Buddha's instructions to his child when Rahula, the son, was 7 years old, started out with 1, you've got to be truthful. Never tell a lie. And then 2, take responsibility for your actions. When you do something and it's caused harm, take responsibility for that and learn from that. Those are the 2 qualities that you want to teach the child.
Ajahn, I make all the determination regarding practice,
Mm-hmm.
but I stop myself from committing to the practice.
Mm-hmm.
Any advice for the reason for this and what I can do? Because I'm very enthusiastic that yes, I'm going to do it, and then it just drops away.
Okay, there are at least 2 of you. There are at least 2 of you. And probably more. Meaning that you have to sit down with the whole committee and say, okay, we're really going to do it this time. Any objections? I want to hear them now and not wait till later.
Lost me, sorry.
Okay. Basically, talk to all the different voices in your mind, the ones that will say, I don't feel like it, I have to get up too early, I don't get enough sleep, and whatever the objections are. And say, okay, I want to hear those objections now so we can go through them. And then you have to have an answer for each of those objections. If they say, I need more sleep, well, nobody's gained awakening by sleeping.
Sorry,
No one has ever gained awakening by sleeping.
Yes.
So you have to have some quick response to the different voices in your mind.
Because usually I have this determination for Dhamma, and then I do a lot of volunteer work, and I get a call to say, oh, we urgently need you. So then the Dhamma falls, and then I go there. And then
Well, in that
I
case, you
feel
got the
guilty.
then you've got the Dhamma of generosity that you're helping.
It's like a cop-out. Like it's just
Well, it can be, but again, you have to decide when you're going to say no, you have to let people know. Sometimes I have to say no because I need to meditate.
What is the reason? Is it a hindrance, Ajahn, that I'm having that's preventing me from this?
Well, you have to ask yourself, when you're choosing to do something else, what is the motivation for doing that? And be honest with yourself. This is where honesty is an important part of the practice.
Yes, because there's actually a determination at my age that I really want to get this, and then I tend to give in, and then I kind of get guilty that I've done this.
Good idea that you're guilty. You have to ask yourself, okay, why do I give into this? I have to understand this motivation. And then when you can see that, oh, this is why I do that. And let the people for this organization know that you cannot be on call all the time. That you have your limitations, that you need time for your own practice. Because as the Buddha said, you want to be generous in a way that doesn't harm you and doesn't harm the person receiving your generosity. Now, harming you would be getting in the way of your practice.
I noticed that after doing a retreat here one time, actually my own life as well, I hadn't been able to reach the same feeling because of all the hindrances getting in the way. Is there a reliable way of reaching that rapture?
Okay, we've got to tell yourself that when you go back, you're going to have to make some changes in your life. You can't just take the meditation and stick it into your life as it already is. You have to ask, what changes do I have to make in my daily schedule? My amount of time I spend on the internet, what things I do look at the internet, that I'm going to have to change so that I can have room for the practice. And when you're practicing at home, it's more a question of sort of maintaining what you have. Progress is sometimes difficult, but you want to at least maintain a sense of continuity as you go through the day. And that's the second thing, is how do you maintain continuity? And that's through what's called restraint of the senses. When you're looking at something or listening to something, you have to ask yourself, why am I looking? Why am I listening? Or as I was talking about yesterday, in John Lee's image, you say, who in me is looking? Who in me is listening? What's their motivation? And you realize, okay, I'm looking because anger is motivating me, or greed is motivating me, or lust is motivating me. I can't look in that way. I have to look in another way. And that having that sense of control over your sensory involvement, that creates the environment for your meditation. Because the depth you get in your meditation has a lot to do with the momentum and the continuity. So it's not just sticking an hour of meditation in here, an hour of meditation in there, and everything else is the same as it was before. That's going to weaken the meditation quite a bit.
With the number of different meditation techniques or types, sometimes I'm unsure about which one to do, whether I should consistently do breath or body or Metta or Dharma. So I'm a little.
Okay.
Do you have recommendations about how to work out what to do and when to do it?
Okay, basically you want to have one technique that's your home base.
Okay.
And the Buddha usually recommends the breath as home base.
Okay.
And then when issues come up that require, say, contemplation of the body, have that, as part of your toolkit. Ajahn Lee gives the image of basically where you live and then where you go foraging. You live with the breath, and then you go foraging with metta, with body contemplation, with other things like that.
Hi, Ajahn.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask sort of two sides of one question. What do you see as the downfalls of sort of the secularization of Buddhism that's happening in the West?
Mhm.
And on the opposite end of that, what are the benefits of really diving headfirst into faith and just all of that?
Okay, well, when the Buddha taught things like karma and rebirth, he wasn't teaching it just to have some cultural baggage. That was an important part of his awakening experience. The image that he gave with that things he awakened to were like the leaves in the forest, whereas what he taught was like the handful of leaves. And the handful of leaves is really important, because when you have in back in the mind with the teaching on karma that you are responsible for your actions, and what you're experiencing right now is partly the result of what you did in the past and partly the result of what you're doing right now, then that encourages you to be more careful about what you're doing right now. And also when bad things come your way, you can take it like a good sport. You say, I must have been a real character in a previous lifetime to meet up with some of these things. So having that in the back of your mind it's a good working hypothesis. A lot of secular Buddhism is based on the idea of saying, well, the Buddha teaches these things, but I don't really know, so I'm going to be agnostic about it. Well, the Buddha is not expecting you to know. He just calls this right view, not right knowledge. It's a hypothesis you're going to test. And when you test that way, I know a number of people who told me they don't like the idea of karma and rebirth because they would have to become better people, which is the whole point. So that's the aspect you're missing in the secularization of Buddhism.
What are the best techniques that you know to reduce distractibility, especially during meditation?
Okay, basically tell yourself, in here is safe, out there is dangerous. And so if you find your mind wandering off to other things, just tell yourself, what are you looking for? Why are you looking for it? And then just keep coming back, coming back, coming back. Now some people find that they need a guided meditation to help sort of act like mindfulness for them in the beginning. So there are good guided meditations online. If your mindfulness is weak, then you have to depend on the voice to say, no, focus here, focus there, focus here. And after a while you start developing the habit that you can remind yourself to stay here. Which one were you talking about? I didn't hear the beginning of your question. Oh, greed, hate, and delusion. Oh, delusion is the hardest one because you don't know you're deluded. And so the way you deal with that, you say, I'll act on what I think to be the best course of action, and then look very carefully at the results. And if you see, okay, I thought it was going to be a good action, but it turned out to cause harm, you've learned something. Because that's the difference between a good intention and a skillful intention. A good intention may be diluted, and the only way you're going to know, though, is to test it. So that's the hardest one. Okay, well, they say anger arises quickly and passes away quickly. It depends on who you are. My teacher had a student who, to make a very long story short, had a memory of something that King Ashoka did 2,000 years ago to her father. And as she was telling my teacher about this memory she was having, she was still angry. And he said, well, that's a grudge you've carried for 2,000 years. So some grudges go away slowly.
Ajahn, I would love to get some advice from you on this word reflection, because I keep hearing it. I don't know how to do it. Like, they say, end of the day, do reflection.
Mm-hmm.
Could you please advise me how to?
Okay, reflection, you actually basically think about what your intentions were as you went through the day, what you did based on those intentions, and what the results were. And you ask yourself, this is the instruction the Buddha gave to Rahula. Before you act, be very clear about your intention. If you anticipate that it's going to cause harm, don't do it. If you don't see any harm, or don't foresee any harm, then follow through. While you're doing it, don't save your reflection for the end of the day, because sometimes while you're doing something you can see, oh, this is actually causing harm, I've got to stop. but you don't see any harm, you continue. Then when the action is done, then you look at the long term. And if you see that you caused harm, then you resolve not to repeat that mistake. So that's the reflection you're trying to reflect on. What were my intentions? What did I do? What were the results? That we can learn.
Because I seem to do on autopilot during the day,
Mm-hmm.
and
That's not good. Autopilot is not, it's not Dharma practice. You have to think about what your intentions are.
for
Each major action, yeah.
each action.
Yeah.
And if in my reflection, if there is a negative, how do I overcome? Because again, I have this thing, mentally I'll think, no, I won't do it. But
Okay, you may, when you see that you did something wrong, then you want to talk it over with someone else. A Dharma teacher or somebody else, or a friend who's on the path as well. That means you have to fess up. You can't deny it. But also it means that you'll be able to get somebody else's advice. You know, if you had thought about this, you would have avoided that problem.
because I always wonder whether it's a hindrance that's working for me and how to overcome that.
Okay, part of the hindrance is that you don't like admitting mistakes. Yeah. And that way you're not going to learn.
Sorry?
If you don't admit your mistakes, you're not going to learn.
Because that's when ignorance comes into
Right,
play, because
right.
I'm unaware.
Right. And it's sometimes ignorance is simply not knowing. Sometimes it's willed. I don't want to know. That's the one you have to watch out for.
Sorry, that's
Willed ignorance, where you don't want to know. That's what you have to watch out for.
how do you watch out for that when you're not aware of it?
Okay, well again, it's like anybody's mask. It slips every now and then. And then you can see in the crack, oh, I was actually telling myself not to look.
I know the three kind of suttas are very important.
Mhm.
I was wondering if Ajahn can recommend for us lay people other suttas outside of the three.
The three main ones?
Must familiarize with them.
Okay, number one, Majjhima 61, which is where the Buddha is teaching his son. That's very basic. For meditation, I like Majjhima 140 and Majjhima 121. Let's see what else would be a good sutta. It's hard to find a bad sutta.
It's not sort of like bad, it's like the cream of the cream.
The really best ones, yeah. Okay.
Anything for chanting, other than
Whatever you like to chant. Sometimes the poetry sounds nice when you chant it, sometimes the prose sounds nice. Find a passage that you like and just learn the Pali. Or if you can't memorize it, at least have it there to read. The Dhammagiri is a good one to chant. There's this chant where the Buddha has a meeting with all the devas called the Mahasamaya. Yeah. And the devas like hearing that. If we're not being recorded, I'll tell you some stories. But for reading purposes, there are a couple of suttas. There's one where the Buddha talks about 5 kinds of loss. I've forgotten the number right now. There were 3 kinds of loss: loss of relatives, loss of wealth, loss of your health are not important. Whereas loss of right view, loss of your virtue, those are important. That's a very basic sutta. In the long discourse, I like Dika Nikaya 2. That's where the king comes and asks, these monks, what are they accomplishing? And the Buddha gives him an answer. And he starts out by saying, well, one thing, suppose you had one of your men becomes a monk, and then we see him as a monk. Are you going to tell him what to do? And no. I would bow down to him and say, there's an accomplishment right there. But then he goes on for more important things.
Can you explain the word anicca?
Anicca?
I understand the English translation of the word impermanence,
Mhm.
and I also think that it's related to one's thoughts. At the same time, I remember Sutta Mary talks about form being anicca, feeling being anicca, perception being anicca, and so on. So I was wondering, the simple meaning of impermanence doesn't make come understand impermanence of the thought process of rise and fall, but I think there must be something much deeper than that, which comes through perhaps, so it's about the realization that if you are attached to a feeling, that can lead to great awakening and henceforth feelings.
Okay, basically it's part of an analysis where the Buddha wants you to look at, when you're attached to something, what's the allure, what's the drawback, and then when you compare the allure with the drawback, you see that it's really not worth it, then you let go. So anicca is one of the drawbacks of whatever you're attached to. Now, impermanence is actually a bad translation. A better one is inconstant, because the word nicca, which is the opposite of anicca, means constant, something you can rely on. Anicca means unreliable. Your form is unreliable. Your feelings are unreliable. Your perceptions are unreliable. Your thought constructs, your consciousness, all these things, you cannot rely on them. And that's the drawbacks of your attachments to these things. I mean, it's the difference between building a house on a mountain. If the mountain, the mountain's impermanent, but if it doesn't have earthquakes, you say, that's solid enough for me, I'll build a house on this mountain. But if the mountain's constantly threatening earthquakes, you say it's not worth it. There are some things that are impermanent it's actually good that they're impermanent. When you're sick, it's good that your sickness will end. But then the illness is unreliable. It goes and comes back again, goes and comes back again. That's what the Buddha's trying to get at. He's trying to get you to develop a sense of dispassion for the things that are inconstant. Change, and also the fact you never know when it's going to change on you. Right. Mm-hmm. Well, basically, the Buddha is saying there are better things to be attached to begin with, attached to the path. And then once the path takes you to where you want to go, then you can let go of the path. Because you found something that does not change. Basically, you're looking for the drawbacks of whatever it is that you're attached to. And that's the first one you would look for, to see in what ways it is unreliable. I mean, you're married, right?
Yes. Mark is right next to me here.
I know. And your attitude toward your wife changes, right? But you like to think that her attitude toward you is constant, right? And then here's someone who's closest to you, but still you can't totally rely on the fact that she's constantly going to love you. There's that great scene between King Basenadi and Queen Malika, where King Basenadi, they're one-on-one in their bedroom, and he says, "Is there anyone you love more than yourself?" And you know what he wants? He wants her to say, "Yes, Your Majesty, I love you more than I love myself." And if this were Hollywood, that's what she'd say. But this is not Hollywood. This is the Pali Canon. No foolishness allowed. And so she said, "No, there's nobody I love more than myself. And how about you? Anybody you love more than yourself?" "No." So that's the end of that scene.
How do you look at beauty and attachment?
Beauty? Duty. Okay, duty. I mean, the Buddha gives you some duties. Four Noble Truths. Each of those truths has a duty. And then as you're in society, you have the duties that society places on you. And you want to see where do these duties conflict and where do they fit together. But as long as you have some duties, it's part of your training as a mature adult to hold to your duties. Because that gives you practice, and then when time comes to perform the duties of the Four Noble Truths, you've developed good habits. You don't just shirk things off.
The wisdom or the knowledge that we get from the direct experience and the wisdom or the knowledge that we get from the jhana, what is the difference and how they help each other, or how they help us to go to end of the suffering? How does you understand?
Okay, there's wisdom from direct experience and the wisdom from
From the jhana.
jhana practice. Okay, well, again, you have to learn how to be a good judge, because jhana is a kind of experience, and you're going to be learning things from the practice of jhana. The number one thing you're going to learn is first how you get the mind to settle down. You're going to learn a lot about your defilements, how your mind goes for sensual desire, how it goes for ill will, sloth and torpor, all the hindrances. So there's knowledge that comes in the process of mastering this skill. And then when the mind is still, when the mind is still, things will come up and they have to be tested. You can't totally rely on them. And the same thing with direct experience. I mean, your direct experience on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes you'll learn correct lessons and sometimes you'll learn lessons that are not. So you have to keep reflecting. If I actually apply this idea, does it make me more reliable or less reliable? Does it give me good advice, bad advice? So in each case, you have to test things. It's not the case that one is totally reliable. Both of them can have misinformation.
I'd like some advice. In my meditation practice, I haven't been doing for a while because as soon as I start with the breath and then I go into a total quietness, stillness, I don't even feel my body. There's nothing there. And then I come out of it. Like I can sit for 1 hour plus. And I'm not gaining anything. I feel
Okay, that's called delusion concentration. It's called delusion concentration, where the mind is still, but you're not very clear about what it's focused on.
There's nothing there.
There's nothing there. Okay, what you have to do is be very conscious of your body. And this is why we focus on the breath, not just at the nose, but also through the breath throughout the body. Try to be fully aware of the whole body all the time.
What do you mean, excuse me if I say, about breath all over the body?
There's an energy flow in your body all the time.
So is it an imagination that you're imagining it going?
If you can imagine it, it helps, but that doesn't mean that it's imaginary. Sometimes there's certain things you don't see until you can imagine them, and then you say, oh, that's already there. Like knowing that the world is round. How many times have you actually seen the fact that the world is round?
I haven't, but it's a trust.
It's a trust. It's a belief. But you can test it, right? If you fly, say if you're, for me, a constant issue is flying from Thailand to Los Angeles. You go past Alaska. Now, looking on a flat map, that doesn't make any sense. But it's the quickest route. It's the quickest route because the world is round. So you can test that hypothesis. So, but first you have to be able to imagine. Okay, imagine what it's like. The world is round.
Sorry.
Imagine that the world is round,
Okay.
and then you can test the hypothesis.
So with the breath,
The same with the breath. You have to imagine it first.
imagine or pretend that it's going everywhere.
Just say, whatever breath energy is there, I allow it to flow. And then as you get more sensitive, you begin to realize it really is there.
Okay. What's I just go immediately into that stillness, that quietness.
Okay, the mind is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and then it just kind of disappears. What you've got to do is reestablish full body awareness. Where are your toes? Where are your feet? Where are your legs? Where are your arms? Where are your shoulders? Where's your head? Be fully aware of the whole body. That takes some energy, but that energy is what keeps you awake and keeps you from zoning out.
And then what's the next step? Because I really want to get out this samsaric journey,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to be able to do insight meditation. I've heard about, in that state of meditation.
Okay, well, once the mind gets really quiet, then you start looking at where your attachments are.
Is it a dialogue that you're having?
There's going to be a dialogue. And the question is, okay, what am I really attached to? If I had to die right now, what would my mind latch onto? If I were to die right now, what would I latch onto?
I would love to latch on to the Lord Buddha.
Okay, this one?
Yes.
But
Well,
then,
yeah, I would right now. I commit to that aim as my focus.
okay. But what other things might you latch onto?
Frankly, nothing that comes to mind because I want to get out of attachment.
But you have to ask yourself, well, suppose I were to latch on to a relative or to something else. How would I get past that attachment?
I would like to latch on to anicca, the concept of
Okay, that's the committee member who's sitting here in the monastery right now. When you get home, I said, that's your committee member who's sitting here in the monastery right now. But then there's the committee member who, when they call you, hey, Ben, come and help us right now, boom, you go. That's a different committee member. That committee member may take over. The one that just is willing to go anywhere. So you've got to watch out for that. Say, okay, what is that attachment?
Well, at the moment I don't have it, but if I was really tired, I'd want a coffee.
Okay. Okay, then you have to start thinking about, why am I attached to the coffee, or why am I, again, think about that thing you said earlier about they call you up and you drop the practice and you go.
Yes, because I want to be of service.
Okay.
I'm not doing, yes, there's some kind of...
There's an attachment. Yeah. So look at that.
Look at that.
Yes. And see why you're attached and how you can let go.
Why I'm attached to the external world.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I'm stuck, because there's a part of me that really wants to get out of samsara, and there's another part of me that's drawn. What is it?
You've got to study the part that's drawn. You've got to study that part. In other words, see, why do I go there?
Why I'm drawn out.
And watch for, okay, when the impulse to go rises in the mind, notice that. Okay, there goes the impulse. Why did I come up with that?
Because that wrong committee member is there.
Okay, we've got to deal with that committee member.
Sorry.
You're going to have to deal with that committee member. You have to understand it.
I learned something valuable yesterday, the committee members.
Okay,
So, ask him to get lost and then...
right, yeah.
Is there any downside to really, really enjoying the reunion of Dharma friends, especially old Dharma friends? I have to say, I get the biggest thrill in the world.
Okay, the downside is when you're alone without them. You have to learn how to get the same charge without being surrounded by Dharma people.
It's such a charge.
Mm-hmm. Learn how to create the charge yourself.
You do that just by remembering the connection.
Partly remembering the connection, and then asking yourself, when I'm with these people, how do I breathe? What kind of images am I holding in mind? How can I recreate that sense inside myself?
Sharon, I need you experience what is the most effective way of reducing the attachment to the body?
Mm-hmm. The most effective way is to, one, visualize it, taking it apart, and asking yourself, okay, in your imagination, okay, imagine all the different parts of your body arrayed on the floor, You ask yourself, okay, which part am I attached to? And then the next question is, when you put it all back together again, then you're attached to it again. So you go, what's the difference? And then usually detachment has to do with, well, because of the body, I get to experience certain pleasures that I wouldn't experience without it. I get to do certain things I wouldn't be able to do without it. What's the appeal of those things? Because the attachment to the body is not just to the body, but it's also to what it can do for you. You have to analyze that.
When you talk of the committee and you use this, do you use this during meditation? Is it like an open dialogue with the parts of your committee? And is it, because I'm a psychology student, and there's a strain of therapy called internal family systems. Is it similar?
It's somewhat similar, but I found that your mind has more members than just the traditional family members. There's lots of other members in there. There's the Buddhist teachings on the topic of what's called becoming are relevant here. Every time you have a desire and you decide you're going to go for it, part of that has to do with the object you desire, part of it has to do with your sense of the world in which that object exists, and then part of it has to do with your identity within that world that you're going to take on. So each of those becomings, I mean, you can imagine how many you've had in the course of a day, the different desires that would pull you here and there. And many of them just kind of hang around. And they have their ideas about what would be a good thing to do with your time right now, how about now? And they argue among one another. And a large part of the meditation is learning how to recognize them and not go with them. In your state of concentration, you're creating a new becoming, a new committee member, the meditator, who's going to inhabit the body and is going to be in charge of things. And then it's a question of who you can convert to your purposes, who you have to drive out and get sensitive to the dynamics.
Because before I heard of your metaphor, simply the committee, I learned about internal family systems therapy before, and I started using this in my meditation. So if like a committee member would come up and be really loud, I would give it its 20 seconds and listen to it, and then I'd say, that's really nice, we can get to that later, but right now we're doing this. Is that?
That's one way of dealing with it, yeah.
That's one way to
Yeah.
I found it really useful.
Yeah. I have a student back in the States who came to the States when she was, I guess, about 12 years old, and she learned English by watching Star Trek. And so she she started naming the different members of her committee, Dr. Spock, Scotty, the rest. So you can imagine all kinds of names for your committee members. But I found it very helpful. And it's also helpful when you're thinking about the theory about not self. Is you don't have just one self, you have many selves. You have to sort through them.
And I have found it really clears up where this cravings come from.
Right.
This personification. You can almost talk to it. You can talk to the craving.
Right.
I found it really powerful myself. But I wasn't sure because I took it from a non-Buddhist technique, but it's nice to hear. I'm not sure. Where did you find that in your practice?
When I was sitting alone on a mountain, I realized there was more than just one me here. No, that's it. If I can digress a little bit, sometimes the teachers in Thailand have to deal with exorcisms, and there's two ways of exercising a spirit. One is to drive it out, and the other is to negotiate. And the spirit can stay, but this stays on, friendly terms. And my teacher was always used method number 2. And I saw a very dramatic case of this one time. There was a woman who had what we would call Tourette's syndrome. And she came one time and brought him a glass of sugarcane juice. And he took a sip, and then he gave the glass back to her and said, okay, drink that. She drank it, and then the symptoms came on. And he started talking to the symptoms. Okay, Who are you? Why are you harassing this woman? What are you doing to her life? And it started responding, saying, in a previous lifetime she did all these horrible things to me, and I don't want to get her to get away without my punishing her. And he said, if you keep on punishing her, she's going to come back in the next lifetime punish you. Do you want that? And there was a moment of silence. No. How about letting her have a normal life and make merit and dedicate the merit to you? That way you both benefit. How about that? Would that satisfy you? Yes. That was it. That was the end of your syndromes. So sometimes that's what's going on. There is another committee member in there.
Question is on karma. And I somehow feel that one is to understand how karma and your actions, thoughts, and all of those things connect together.
Mm-hmm.
And if, for example, to understand that mechanism, you really to understand that if you don't create new karma, that means you don't, it will not propel you forward to more and more works and so on. Does it make sense to think like that?
Okay, you have to realize that what you're experiencing right now is the combination of two things. One is the results of past karma, and then there's your current intentions, which are your current karma, and then there's the results of those intentions. What you experience is the combination of all those things. And so your old karma is constantly, it's like a field. It has different plants that sprout at different rates. And then the things you pay attention to, the things you don't pay attention to. If you pay attention to something, that will encourage that to grow and bear fruit. And that's how our experience gets put together. Without our current intentions, we would not experience the six senses. We're constantly, even when people say, I'm not creating any karma, I'm just sitting here doing nothing. Doing nothing is a kind of karma. The totally not doing anything at all, that would be a moment of awakening, where the present moment just falls apart. Up to that point, you're trying to create skillful skills, master good skills, so you put things together in a skillful way. That's what the path is all about. And the path will take you to a point where there really is no karma, and that's when you have a taste of the deathless.
So you try to think that if there is no karma, there is no birth.
Right. Well, they have these moments of awakening first, where you have a moment of no karma at all, and then you pick it up again. But for an arahant, there's going to be no more birth after that. Can't hear you.
The most skillful application is sankhara, that is practicing the
Yeah.
Everywhere is fabrication there.
Okay, what your fabrication is sankhara, is what you're putting together, and the Noble Eightfold Path is the best of all fabricated things. And you're putting it together through the views that you hold, through the resolves that you make, through the actions you do, the efforts that you make, how you try to be mindful, how you get the mind focused. All of this is a kind of karma that you're putting mind in a state where everything gets perfectly balanced. And when everything is perfectly balanced, then you can let go.
So even in the fire and with sankhara is so strong because all the others fall into it.
Okay, the five aggregates are right there in a state of concentration. You've got the body, which is form. You've got the feeling of pleasure. You've got the perception of your mental image of the breath. You've got your thoughts about the breath. And you've got your awareness of the breath and the body. That's your state of concentration. So you're putting the aggregates together in a very skillful way. And then you can see, even when I do this skillfully, it still has its drawbacks. It's still inconstant, still stressful. I have to let it go. So you're taking these things which ordinarily, if they're done in ignorance, would cause suffering, and you're doing them in knowledge, and that turns them into a path.
Could you speak a little bit about Ajahn Buddha's visions?
Visions in meditation can happen in two ways, one with your eyes closed, one with your eyes open. And in some cases, it's kind of like a brief dream where you sort of, there's a lapse of mindfulness a little bit, but something comes in and you see something very clearly. And sometimes, even though it's very brief, it contains a lot of information. There are other times when you actually see something happening outside, which is to say, this is really unreal, but you see it with your regular eyes. And so the question is, how much reality should you give to these things? And this is where you have to ask yourself, well, what lesson do they teach? And if it seems to be a good lesson, then you put it to the test. And if it's not teaching you any lesson, if it just seems to be random stuff, just let it go.
Would it be beneficial then to reflect on that during meditation?
Yeah, you ask yourself, what kind of information am I getting from this? And sometimes it's just, you'll have a glimpse that seems to be a previous lifetime. You say, well, I may have been all kinds of things. It helps you to sympathize with other people. You don't have to give too much credence to the details of what you see. But the general message is that, I'm capable of being all kinds of things, man, woman, child, different kinds of animals. And it creates a sense of sort of fellow feeling and compassion. That would be a lesson you could take.
I have a friend who is interested in meditation. So this is two questions. One, how do you help somebody to meditate when they have had experienced a lot of trauma? Because the trauma tends to resurface during meditation. Two, how do you explain the difference between experience and fruit of meditation to somebody who has very little to no understanding of Buddhism?
Okay, one is if you're going to help that person meditate, sit and meditate with them so they don't feel that they're alone, that you're there with them. If they have problems associated with the body, like if the trauma was a physical trauma or sexual trauma, teach them a meditation topic that doesn't involve the body to begin with, like thoughts of goodwill for all beings, thoughts of goodwill for themselves, something like that. And I didn't understand the second part of your question.
Like the fruit of meditation is awareness, whereas the experience of meditation is either dullness, happiness, rapture, etc. So, how do you encourage people to continue meditation without being attached to the calmness, the happiness, and those things?
Okay, tell them that they're mastering a skill, and to reflect on any skill that they've worked on in the past, realizing that there are times when they're going to be dull periods, but then there are going to be good periods. But you realize you have a goal that you're working toward, and you have confidence that you can do it. And then you ask yourself, well, what lesson can I learn about, okay, when I'm dull, what can I do about the dullness? When I'm feeling distracted, what can I do about the distraction? These are going to be skills that you're going to have to work on.
This might be a primordial question or purely ignorance question. From time to time, I get caught up with the feeling, why do I feel I exist?
Punch yourself in the face. I said, punch yourself in your face. You say, I exist. Yeah.
And if I don't feel I exist, if there is a possibility of not feeling I exist, then the whole world doesn't exist. The whole world exists because I feel I exist. That might be a very ignorant question. I can punch on myself on the face, but I don't think I can get the answer. Why am I stuck with that kind of question?
Okay.
From time to time?
There are questions that the Buddha says that you are better put aside, and you ask yourself, instead of asking why do I exist, you ask yourself, why do I keep on creating a sense of me? Look at the process. There's a process you can watch. How do I create this sense of me? How do I do this? Is it worth it? And when you're working on the path, whatever sense of me is needed to work on the path, you create that sense of me. But there will come a point where you realize that that's the very last thing you're going to let go. So you use your sense of yourself as a tool. And as for the concept of not self, anything that's not helpful on the path, you say, I can let that go. I don't have to identify with that. I'm just going to identify with the things that keep me on the path. That I'm responsible for doing it. I'm going to benefit. And then I can learn from my actions. There's a part of me that can observe myself. Try to keep those three aspects of yourself healthy. And that way you learn.
Is it safe to conclude that parenting can be part of the mindfulness practice?
Yeah, parenting would be mindfulness practice both for your sake and for the sake of the child. Because remember what mindfulness is. It means to keep something in mind. And you're trying to develop three qualities: mindfulness, alertness, in other words, knowing what you're doing while you're doing it, and then a sense of ardency, wanting to do it well. And this means having a clear idea of what would be skillful and what would not be skillful, and then looking at what you're actually doing. Is it skillful? Is it not? And if it's not, what can I do to change? And so both for your own sake and looking after your emotions while you're dealing with a child that's waking you up at 3 a.m., and also for what you're going to teach the child. No, alertness is specifically being alert to what you're doing and the results of what you're doing. Awareness is just generally knowing what's happening. What's the question?
Do you send your advice and help for a 9-year-old kid who has lack of attention and emotion management? So can he have any kind of meditation topic or practice for him, or the best way to help him to manage those legacies?
Okay, one is you'll try to make meditation into a game and say, count your breaths and see how many breaths you can count. And if you miss a breath, okay, start up with 0 again and try counting again and see how far you can go. And the process of having to remember what number you just did and the next number and the next number, that helps to build a sense of your mindfulness, basically. And then your ability to notice when you've dropped it, that develops the quality of what's called metacognition, where you learn how to watch your own mind. Because a lot of kids that have these kinds of issues are not really good at observing themselves. They're kind of in a mental state, but they can't pull out. And so part of the game is, okay, you have to watch to see when you lost count and then start over again. And that just helps develop that quality of your internal observer.
I just want to clarify, so count the breath in and breath out,
Mm-hmm.
is 1, out is 2.
That can be, or just breathe in, out 1, in, out 2, in, out 3. Depends on what you want.
And then after the certain number, ask him to come back in.
Okay, if it gets to 100, then you can give him an ice cream cone.
I'm wondering if you could say something about what an appropriate view of anger can be on the path. Noticed if, say, I'm going away and I become aware I have been angry, it's helpful to know it.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing this clear. I just wonder about the view of it. Can it be useful, or is it just to know it?
Okay, you want to know it, then you want to ask yourself exactly what made me angry. And if it's something that really needs to be dealt with, then the next question is, can I deal with it effectively while I'm angry? And the answer is no. Okay, I've got to calm down first, then I can deal with it. We're not just talking to you, just accept. That doesn't help at all. And so this is when you have to remember the three component factors of any emotion, which is 1, the way you're breathing, 2, the way you're talking to yourself, 3, the perceptions you're holding in mind. So ask yourself, okay, how am I breathing? Calm down. Okay, what am I saying to myself? That's stupid. And okay, calm down.
And you're saying to take the information from it, and act on it, but not in that state.
And
That makes sense.
yeah. Because then you see the thing that's sparked by anger really is wrong. Something should be done. Okay, then I've got to calm down, and then, okay. My mother was an author, and she liked to give us unusual names, like Jeffrey with a G is not normal in America. But my other brothers had even stranger names, Galen, Giles, which are not normal names in America. My grandfather, who was a farmer, and had also been an amateur boxer when he was young, did not think much of our names. And so when Galen was 6 years old, time to go to school, he was my older brother, Grandpa took him aside and said, look, they're going to make fun of your name, so you're going to have to learn how to fight back. So I taught him a few boxing moves. And as they were boxing, Galen was doing pretty well, so Grandpa got more and more aggressive. And Galen just lost his temper and started flailing. And Grandpa put his hand on his head and said, look, you've got to grow cold, then you hit the guy. So, go cold. In the back.
Do you have advice on sort of emotional numbness? I went through like a period of depression, and it's a lot better than I overcame it. It still feels like there's numbness there. It's not, things didn't wake back up fully.
Mm-hmm.
Just emotionally. It's not like what you have that verbal or bodily fabrication, but the emotional sort of fabrication.
Okay, you might want to. This is one of those cases where you might want to talk to it. So, okay, what am I still hiding from myself? That's the numb part. And then when you can get it to express itself, then you can get some idea of what to do. There's a hand way in the back.
Do you have anything to say about the anger and the calm down? So if one's made some progress in calming themselves when they see anger that's not skillful or useful, and so they're in a situation then with someone that's close to them, and they see this person very hot and angry, and so their intuitive response is to do what's helped to them in their experience, to say, hey, calm down, it'll help you, but then that just makes them more angry.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes you have to let them run out of steam a little bit. Let them express whatever their anger is, and okay, once they express it, then you say, okay, what would be the best thing to do based on this situation that you're angry about? And try to get them to think reasonably. And then they can see for themselves that trying to think while they're angry is not going to be helpful. They've got to calm down. They've got to see themselves the need to calm down. So when they finish venting, it's okay, what would be a good thing to do about this? And if they just want to vent, just say, okay, some other time.
What do you think the notion of concept of you become what you think? How is it related to Buddhism?
Okay, if you think about things in a certain way often enough, it becomes a habit, and based on your habits, you tend to do things that will give rise to that particular state. Now, the Buddha didn't say that, but he does say that when you think about certain things again and again and again, that you bend your mind in that direction. So you have to be careful about what things you habitually think about.
I have a very basic question, and maybe a bit sensitive. Only in terms of lay people's support for the monk. Because in conversation, I sometimes somebody will say, "Oh, this monk like this, so I'm going to give him this." So I tend to think it's so hard to be one, and it's so hard to be not. So I think if I want to be a good friend of the monk, I want them all to become arahant. So I sort of feel if they like something, we feed them and it strengthens that attachment. Whereas for me, if
You're asking a monk this question?
That's why I say so. But for me, I think if I give the monk good food, I give them good condition, that is going to help them in their practice. I'm most happy to do that. But it's not as if I'm going to torture the monk by not giving them what they want. Instead, I think as a good friend, I feel if I'm in the position where I have the access to be free, somebody provide a condition for me, I'll be very grateful. So is it wrong to think like that, or am I just...
No, you want to give the monk something that you think would actually help with his practice, something good for his health. Those are the main conditions. You don't have to ask him, "Why do you like?"
No, I don't ask it. It's just I heard in conversation. Somebody said, "Oh, this monk..."
Oh, that's gossip. You don't have to listen to gossip.
Because there's an internal...
There's nothing worse than learning that somebody says this. Notice that I like something, and then I get it again and again and again and again and again. So just think about what would be good for the monk's practice, what would be good for the monk's health. That's enough.
Isn't it the monk's way of contemplation, whether he wants to take what he likes, or people will offer anything that they like to offer. But isn't it up to the monk?
It's up to the monk how he responds to offerings, yeah.
We are not encouraging the dream, but
Right. Whatever you feel would be good for him. One last question?
One thing I heard that, then I can talk for myself, that there is a strong tendency for anger more than anything. How do I overcome that? If I see someone doing wrong, I just...
Okay, if someone's actually doing something wrong, as I said, the question is this something I can do to stop that?
No, because that's that person's personality, and it's none of my business, but my tendency is more towards the anger side.
Just ask yourself, who made you the National Bureau of Standards? What do they call that in Australia?
There isn't one.
There isn't one? You don't have a National Bureau of Standards?
No.
Oh. No, in America there's a National Bureau of Standards, which establishes how long a foot is, how long a second is, those kinds of things.
But that's freedom units. See, we don't have that here.
I'm just wondering.
In other words, if you don't like that person's personality, you're going to ask yourself, is it because I see something of myself in that person that I don't like?
Because some people...
Make it relevant to you,
The last thing I want is when I'm dying, I have an angry thought. That's what I'm asking.
Okay, well, just tell yourself, this, whatever it is I'm angry about, if it's nothing that I can do anything about, then it's none of my business.
Because I do volunteer work and I see people have different perceptions and they try and put their take on me. And that kind of makes me agitated, irritated, which I know is a sign of anger. And I'm just thinking,
Okay, well, you can let their ideas just go past. You don't have to take them on.
why do I
Everybody's mind is like a vacuum cleaner. Whatever dirt there is in the room, you suck it right up.
So your advice, Bhante, I'm the vacuum cleaner taking it.
But just say, let it go past. I don't have to take it on. Okay, I hope this has been helpful. If you're free, come. We have another session tonight at 7 o'clock. And Ajahn Keng has a session at 5, so you can lots of Dharma entertainment tonight.